morning, YouTube. This is Kelsey from Kels Reads Things, also known as Librarians Recommend, and I am here today to discuss with you my favorite books that I have read thus far in 2020. Now, this will be a reoccurring video that I do at least once every quarter. So I look forward to those future videos, but today I'm going to discuss with you the 11 titles I have listened to and or read in 2020. Now, I say listen to because you can listen to audiobooks from a free app provided by your library known as Libby. Audiobooks are wonderful if you happen to be a busy person who has very little time to actually sit down and read books. You can listen to one while you're doing work tasks or other things that take over our busy lives. So I highly recommend that app. It's wonderful and I use it myself. So if that tells you anything, I hope you're at least assured that it's a great service that librarians can provide. Okay, so to go into my list of books that I've read and or listened to this year. I have read and or listened to Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey Quiston, Winterwood by Shay Earnshaw, The Hating Game by Sally Thorne, Crone of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas, which is the second book in the Throne of Glass series, Echo North by Joanna Ruth Mayer, Would Like to Meet by Rachel Winards, Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas, which is the third book in the Throne of Glass series, Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, So Close to Being the Y'all Don't Even Know by Retta, and I Owe You One by Sophie Kinsella. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of background information about me, I'm sure I've mentioned this at least in a few other of my videos, but I am a huge fan of fantasy and romance comedy. Those are my two favorite fiction genres to read about. I also do enjoy reading nonfiction, but personally, when it comes to nonfiction, I'm usually gravitate towards something that's instructional, such as learning a little bit more about finance or how the economy works. I also like to read about lifestyles. For instance, my absolute favorite nonfiction book in the entire world is The Little Book of Hygge by Meek Wiking. And it's about Danish culture and how freedom is to America as hygge is to Denmark. And hygge is, it's a lifestyle sort of ritual. Or maybe ritual's potentially not the correct word, however, it is a way of life, so to speak, in Denmark. And I really recommend it for people who just like to sit back and learn about other cultures and also who are kind of cozy people themselves. I myself am very much a person who enjoys the comforts of home. You could probably describe me as a hobbit in Tolkien's world. And I'm also a Hufflepuff from Harry Potter. So again, I highly recommend The Little Book of Hygge for people who enjoy cozy reads that are also informative. Okay. So moving on, I'm also a fan of young adult books, but I really prefer them to be slightly more leaning towards the new adult category. That is a little bit of a new catalogization that hasn't necessarily been really pushed in libraries yet. We mostly just have a young adult category and adult. However, new adult is somewhat of a new term for books that are kind of in between. Usually the target audience is 17 to, I want to say, 23, 24-ish. So there is that. Okay, so now I'm going to discuss my two favorite romances that I've read this year. I had a really hard time picking between the two of these because one, Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I'm sorry, I said her last name incorrectly earlier, so I apologize, Miss Casey. But this is a beautiful LGBTQ adult book about a young man who is, he is the president's son. His name is Alex, and he falls in love with the British prince. And what is his name? I'm so sorry. It's been a little bit since I read this. Henry. Excuse me. His name is Henry. And I actually listened to the audiobook for this one. I did not physically read it. I was not a huge fan of the narrator. I did get used to them. However, I almost wish I had just read this one. But I very much enjoyed it because it was a very modern read. It was very prominent in progressive culture. Obviously, it's probably going to be slightly leaning more towards the liberal outlook because it is an LGBTQ book. So just to give you a little bit of heads up, if you don't really prefer to read things that are more progressive, then this may not be the read for you. But what I really enjoyed about it was that it was progressive. The language was, the dialogue in general between characters was hilarious and just brilliant. Honestly, I very much enjoyed the writing style that this author used. I will say it is very much an adult book. I would almost rate it as R, maybe PG-13, just because there is a lot of adult language specifically. There aren't nearly many as adult content scenes, such as, you know, on a physical realm. However, there is a lot of somewhat aggressive language. So if you're not interested in reading books that have that kind of prominency with language, I wouldn't recommend it for you. But in general, it was a beautiful book about overcoming circumstances, about standing up against prejudices, and falling in love with someone you originally hated. It was one of those enemies turn to lovers reads, and I love stories like that because they always seem to create the most interesting dynamics between characters. Plus, all the secondary characters were very well fleshed out and they were very enjoyable. Pretty much everyone was hilarious. So I definitely very much enjoyed Red, White, and Royal Blue. I believe I gave it a 4.5 star rating. Okay, so that's that one. The other romance read that I read that I really genuinely loved was The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. And what I really loved about this book was, again, the dialogue between characters and their dynamic. There were so many times that I laughed out loud, and it was one of those books I could not put down. I believe one evening I read it for probably 3 hours past my bedtime. So if that gives you any indication, it was a fantastic book, and it is going to be made into a film. It was a best book of 2015, so obviously it was very popular. And just in general, not only the dialogue, but the situations that these two characters get into is just very, very funny. Lucy and Joshua, that's what the characters' names were. And I believe I gave this I want to say a 5-star rating. Yes, I did. So I very much enjoyed these two romance reads. If I had to pick between the two of them, I would say probably The Hating Game was my favorite just because I tore through it quicker. However, in terms of heart and overcoming circumstances and prejudices, I very much also enjoyed Red, White, and Royal Blue, and it has been highly recommended by other librarians and literature professionals. So either one of these would be a wonderful book to pick up, if you're interested in romance, of course. Okay, as for fantasy, I don't actually have the book with me today because it is checked out, and that makes me very, very happy. However, my favorite fantasy read of this year was Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. I could probably do an entire day's worth of a video about how much I love Sarah J. Maas. She is a brilliant author. She constantly surprises me. I always keeps me on my toes. I am just dying to know what happens next. I have a tendency to not be able to put her books down. Could not recommend her enough. I very much look forward to reading her new adult novel, Crescent City House of Earth and Blood. Yes, that's it. However, I unfortunately most likely will not get a chance to read that until maybe May, because I'd really like to finish her Throne of Glass series first, and I still have 4 more books to read in that series. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but when it comes to reading, I like to read something a little more serious and then read something with a little more of a comedic edge to it. So I like to switch it up so that I'm not reading the same thing over and over again and I don't get too bored with that specific content. But Heir of Fire was a fantastic read. Selena, at that point, otherwise known as Aelin, has just grown so much as a character. She starts off in that novel as this broken, devastated shell of a person, and she ends the novel determined to take charge, reestablish herself as the Queen of Terrasen, and take down the tyrant king that she has been dealing with since book 1. So I was exceptionally impressed by Heir of Fire, especially because, as I mentioned in my earlier video, the Throne of Glass series was a little bit of a slow burn for me. I definitely enjoyed it, however, I wasn't as engrossed as I was when I read A Court of Thorns and Roses. And I promised to eventually do a video about A Court of Thorns and Roses, the entire series. I'll obviously do one book at a time, but I love it so much. I want to have a little more practice with making videos before I do that, before I really introduced it to my readers, because I want to do the series justice. That's just how much it has impacted me. It's probably my favorite series. Outside of maybe Harry Potter. I've been a Harry Potter fan since I was 7 years old, and I'm 28 now. So for 21 years, I've been a huge fan of Harry Potter, but if anything, they are equal in my heart for how much I love them. So again, I want to do that video, it's justice. So bear with me. I promise to eventually discuss A Court of Thorns and Roses with you. Okay, and so my overall favorite read so far of 2020, I have to give it to The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. I was just exceptionally impressed. The writing was well done, the characters were very well developed, the dialogue between them was hysterical, the situations they got themselves in was amazing, and the character growth was wonderful. I also there were a few scenes that were just so touching and heart-wrenching, and I can't recommend it enough if you are a fan of romance comedies. Out of all of the romance comedies I've read this year, including Red, White, and Royal Blue, The Hating Game, Would Like to Meet, and I Owe You One, this one was the one that made me laugh the most, and it was the one that I was the most determined to finish. So far, The Hating Game by Sally Thorne is my favorite read of 2020. Alrighty guys, well thank you so much for watching. Next month, or actually this month in April, I plan on reading Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas, Dressed for the Wicked by Autumn Cross, and I am actually reading that now. I'm about a third of the way through and it is fantastic. I absolutely love it so far, and it's not a book I typically read. The theme is very much, it reminds me of Project Runway, but in a historical sense. And so if that gives you any idea of what the book is about, it's just fantastic. Drama, sabotage, and intrigue so far are the real themes for that. I also plan to read Normal People by Sally Rooney, and Queen of The Assassin's Queen by Melissa de la Cruz. Lots of Queen books, apparently, that I'm reading in the next month. Alrighty guys, well again, thank you for watching my video. Feel free to subscribe or leave a comment, give me a suggestion for something I should read in the future. I always look forward to feedback. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful Friday.